right, 7:31. Let's get going. Let me escape out of here and go out of full screen. And as always, we are going to start with some hors d'oeuvres. And the image that I'd like to start with is going to be, you're going to be seeing images tonight of our trip for the past couple of weeks. So they'll going to be mostly the Southwest. And one thing we did before the trip actually started, we were staying in Durango, Colorado, and we took a ride up into the mountains. And although most of our 2 weeks were cloudless, we did have a couple of days this day in Silverton, Colorado, where we got some snow. And how do we fix something like this? So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I talked about setting up a preset if you're going to have the same thing happen a lot. And for me, I do. And when you take a look at this image, let's first look at the histogram. And you can see that all of the highlights are pushed to the right, but maybe not quite far enough. But when you look on the screen up in here, it looks like stuff's gone. So I did this exposure because I was really concerned about protecting this. And I still underexposed it a little bit. But so let's start by bringing up the shadows. I'm just going to bring them up all the way and then bring down the highlights. Basically what I'm doing is I'm cutting down on the contrast. Then I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit. So now we look at the histogram. That's looking better. Now, even though there's snow on the ground, was it pure white? No, because there's no sun. So you got to keep that in mind as well. But look how well the vehicles have started to show up. All the details are not so dark anymore. So I'm going to skip everything else and jump down to presence. So we'll add a little bit of texture, which is, again, fine detail if I zoom in on here. And by the way, if you double click on the word texture here, it will reset it. So there's the before, there's the after. It works on very fine highlight details, adds some sharpening just to those areas. Clarity is mid-tone contrast, so let's add a little bit of that. Be a little more careful with clarity. Clarity causes a lot more damage when you finally export the file. And does this need dehaze? Probably, but I don't know that it needs dehaze in the foreground. Let's take a look. Maybe a smidge. We'll put a little bit in there. I am interested in vibrance and saturation, though. Vibrance is going to bring us more saturated blues, greens, and pale yellows. So let's bring that up. And you can see the blues. Look on the building on the right. You can see the blue coming out. And nothing else is really being affected much. That's all it's picking up on. If I want to get the rest of the street to have a little bit more life, these are very colorful buildings, so I can bring the overall saturation up. And again, you can see, can you go too far? Yeah. On a sunny day, it might look like this, but this is not a sunny day. So let's go to there. Now, there was a lot more going on in the sky than we're seeing. Let's see if we can do something about that separately. So I'm going to click on the masking panel up here and choose sky. And let's see what the software picks. And actually did a pretty good job. It picked some of the mountaintops, but again, it's the snow. Here's where we might be able to use some dehaze to try to bring out the structure, because there was a lot going on here. So let's bring out dehaze, and you can see as we start, you can make it crazy, but you can see as we start to do that, now it's bringing out some details. Now, maybe I don't want it that dark. I do want those details, though, because it was snowing. So let's just bring up the shadows a bit, which will lighten up the dark areas, but still leave those highlights alone. We could bring the exposure up a smidge. And I think that's getting us more where we want. Now, is the image distorted at all? Well, yeah, we have. Let's see what lens this was. I'm going to hit the I key once. There's the date and resolution details, and here's the lens, the f-stop, etc. Now, this was shot at 25 millimeters, which actually on this camera, this is on an OM Mark II, is 25 millimeters is 50 millimeters. So that's not really wide. It just happened to be where I was standing. So let's hit I again and get rid of that. But I still think there's a little bit of bending going on. So let's hit enter, because we're done with the masking panel, and come down to lens corrections. Let's try that. Let's see if there's any distortion going on. And we can do it manually here. We can drag it in and out and see if, well, gee, maybe it just needs a little less of that. And this is personal preference. We can make it odd. Actually, I think there's a very slight bit of distortion there. I'm just looking at the line across the bottom of the buildings. I'm going to go with that for now. And then we have also, under transform, the vertical here is a little bit falling in. So let's straighten that up just a smidge. And I think there's a little bit of rotation off too. A little bit of angle. I'm looking at the building right dead center here. I want that straight up and down. It's okay if this building is angling a little bit, because from my point of view, it very probably was. And I think, I think we can probably almost be done here, but the composition is off. What do I want to say about this? This is a lovely town with not a lot going on this time of year. This was just a couple weeks ago. So let's hit the crop key, which is the R key, or I can come up to here. And I'm going to bring it down. Now, first, I'm going to bring it down and not care about a standard aspect ratio. I want to see what I think the image needs most to make the image work. Let's bring these in a bit. And yeah, maybe even a little more off the top. We don't really need that much of the sky. It's about the inside. And I'm liking that better. And as I see it now, and this happens all the time, as you make your crop, you're going to find that your adjustments are going to change, because different things become the subject when you do that, or they become more important. I think actually I do want a little more saturation in the buildings here, so I'm going to go ahead and bring those up. I'm going to add more life to the image. Yep, that's better. In fact, I think I'm going to bring some contrast back as well. So let's add a little contrast in there. Now, do I want the snow on the foreground lighter, or the sky? Maybe the sky got a little darker here. I don't have to do it again. I can come up to the masking panel and just click on the mask and then bring that exposure up a little bit. I'll leave a little bit of the texture in. I've decided I don't want more than that. Do I need everything left to right? There's kind of something going on here. There's something starting that's being cut right down in the middle. That needs to go. So let's bring the R key again. I'm just going to get rid of that. So again, we can focus on the main street. This building is also maybe a smidge too strong. Yes, it was there, but do I want it to be quite as important as it ended up being? Now I think we're getting somewhere. And I don't think the snow in the front needs to be brighter, but let's try it. We're going to use a new mask. We're going to do a linear gradient. And I'm going to click and drag. And again, for those of you that aren't completely up on this tool, the way it works is it's directional. Everything from the red dot down will be affected at 100% from whatever slider changes I made. From red to the black square will be from 100% to 50%, and then 50% to 0. I can at any time change the angle by clicking in the middle. And if I decide I want to change how soft it is, I can also extend it at any point. I think I just want that. And I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit, get a little more purity to the snow. And you know what? It did need it. That actually is much better. And I think the last thing the image needs is a vignette, because I don't want to spend too much time on this image. So I'm going to hit Enter to get out of my masks, come down to Effects, and add... I'm going to add a -12 vignette, which is my standard. Now, I'm going to hit Command or Control on my keyboard. I just want to have one to flip back and forth. So there's the image we started with. Let's take a look. I'm going to highlight both of these. There's the raw file we started with. And I was a little bit too protective of the highlights, and everything went dark. But was that a problem? No, because there's where we ended up. And I think that tells a nice story. This was more kind of capturing the story of what Silverton is like in the off-season with some snow coming down. So let's move on, because these are just our hors d'oeuvres, our appetizers. Let's move on to something that was a lot more fun. Any questions, by the way, Di?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, this is in Canyonlands National Park. This is an overview of a place called the Schaefer Trail. And if you look down here, this road, this actually goes all the way through Canyonlands and comes out practically in Moab. In fact, it's down in here in these switchbacks as well. I'm going to cut to the chase and make a virtual copy of this right away. so that we can do the basics. Now, again, I mentioned there are certain things I do all the time. And let's do it because I'm going to record this one more time. What happens in landscapes when you have a high contrast scene? Your camera brings it in like this. Very contrasty. Also, the other problem is there are multiple color temperatures going on here. And your camera can only do one, so we're going to have to fix that as well. So let's start by, I'm going to highlights all the way down, shadows all the way up. This is pretty common for my kind of photography. Exposure, because of that, I'm going to bring the exposure up. And again, whites and blacks are fine. You can look at the histogram up on the top here and see it goes almost to black and almost white. So there is no need to bother with the black and white sliders yet. Texture, I'll add a little bit of clarity. This one's going to need a little bit of dehaze. And what it's really going to need is some vibrance and some saturation. Now, I love the coloring in here. That's exactly what I'm after. But I'm not loving it in the foreground and over in here. Why? Because we've got different color temperatures going on. This has gone a little too yellow, and this is a little too bright. The sky is not perfect. We'll play with that in a minute. So now it's time to get local. And I'm going to start with a graduated filter. This is a little too bright and a little too orangey for me. So we're going to use a graduated filter again. And again, remember, here's the keyboard shortcuts. M for linear gradient. Yeah, I don't know how they came up with M. Radial gradient is Shift M. Just go with it. This is one you're going to want to learn. And I'm going to drag this diagonally across here because this thing is too bright, and I don't want that. Your eye is going to go to the brightest thing, and that's not where I want you to go. Now, I don't want to mess with the sky, however. So with this gradient chosen, I'm going to simply click on where it says Subtract and choose the sky. And voila, look, the sky just disappears from that gradient. Now let's bring the exposure down a little bit. Even that much is good. I'm going to bring the highlights down, and I'm going to bring the saturation down because that made it a little too saturated. And as I do that, gee, I think I want it even a little darker. So let's bring the exposure down a little more, and maybe I'll put some contrast in. Now I'm going to bring the blacks down, which will make them a little darker, so that we can again refocus on the middle. Now, something else happens when you're out west. You've got all this reddish orange dirt that's reflecting up on everything, and everything that's green disappears. And you can practically see it with your eyes unless you focus on that thing, and then you see there's really green here. Also, again, this is a little bit too orange, so let's use another linear gradient. I'm going to just hit the M key this time. And I'm going to get the foreground. I'm just going to drag across this. And remember, from here, from the black square to the white dot, the effect is going to fade from 50% to 0. So you can go into something else you don't necessarily want to mess with. And the foreground has gone a little too saturated. I want to desaturate it, but I don't want to take color out of it. I want to take the warmth out of it. So I'm going to add some blue. And look what happens to the dirt. That's the way I remember it looked. That's looking much better. And for the people that were with us over these past couple of weeks, the one thing that I asked people to do everywhere we went is to stare at the shadows and stare at the trees. Because when you do, you're going to see all of a sudden, when you look at it, well, it's actually not that dark. But we need to fix that because when our camera captures it, it's going to be really dark. The same thing with the greens. The greens lose their green with this red reflecting up on it. But if you stare at it, your eye knows that it's green and it fixes it. So we need to do that in our photographs as well. So that's looking better. Now let's deal with the greens. Now we're going to use a brush. And of course, the keyboard shortcut for brush is K. Nothing I can do about that. Now, when I choose the brush, I do want to make sure auto mask is on right here. And let's go ahead and select this. Oop, and I got sloppy. Actually, the brush got sloppy. It actually picked back here. That's all right. Hold on for that thought. I'm also going to make this plant here a little bit greener because I remember it being greener. And then these little things, I think are they aloe? I think that's aloe. All right, so we got a little messy in here, but what I can do without having to go back and subtract it is simply hold down the Alt key, which turns it into a minus. Notice when I do that. And since auto mask is on, if I just kind of paint around in the rocks, it's going to get rid of it. And where else? Let's see. Let's add in there. And I think that's, oh, there's one here too. Let's get that as well. How do I make something greener? Well, surprisingly, it's going to be mostly adding a lot of blue. So I'm going to add blue to it and some green. Actually, it needs more blue. We want this thing to be green. And again, this is the point when you're on location, since your camera can only capture one white balance and there's multiple white balances in the scene, you have to do your editing based on what you remember seeing. So stare at this stuff. I'm going to bring up the saturation too, and I think I'll bring the highlights down a little bit. Okay, that's looking better. What else is going on? Well, there's some haze off in the distance. Well, that always happens. But do I want it that hazy? Do I want to bring it back a little bit? I think so. So let's hit K again, which will give us our brush. And I'm going to go through this background haze in the canyon. And in fact, actually the top over here as well. And let's add a little bit of dehaze to see how that does. That, yeah, there we go. That looks a lot better. Yep, I think that's looking pretty good, so we'll hit enter on that. Now the sky. Now, was I slightly skewed, or is the scene actually skewed? Let's hit R, which is the crop tool again. But if we click on here, down in the corner, notice it turns to a double-edged arrow. I get this line where I can see kind of what the horizon is. And to me, it's just very slightly off. And when I line up the grid on the horizon, you can see an angle over here. It says minus 0.32. So less than 1 degree of rotation can throw you off. And here's the other thing. Even if the canyon was slightly rotated there, maybe that's how it really looks. If you produce an image like this and it's slightly off, it's going to throw people off. They're going to see it and say, well, that's slightly bent. It bothers them even if it really does that. So cut to the chase and do that. Now let's deal with the sky. There's a couple things going on. Excuse me. I used a polarizer here. And what you can see is that the sun is over here. The polarizer is making a little darker over here. And also the sky is a little desaturated, again, because the camera can only pick up the one color. And the canyon down here was a much warmer color than the sky. So let's deal with the sky color first. And I'm going to use the color mixer to do that. So we'll hit color mixer, get the eyedropper, and I'm just going to come up into the sky. And you can see here's blue, and as it goes off to the left, it goes slightly cyan, which is what we're seeing here. I want to make it a little bit warmer. And again, this is something you pay attention to when you're out there. A little bit warmer and a little bit more saturated. And we'll leave it there for now. That's good. But I do have this dark spot. So now we're going to use a radial gradient. So if I come up to the masks, I'm going to add a mask, and we're going to use radial, the Shift M shortcut. And I'm going to position my cursor kind of halfway in between this and just drag out. And I think, something about like that. Yep, that's pretty good. So what do I want to do? I just want to bring up the exposure a little bit, just to get rid of some of that darkness. And there we go. Now, as I also look at this, is there too much sky? I think the answer is yes. There's nothing going on up here, and I want the viewer to focus down into this beautiful canyon. So let's hit R again and bring this down. Now, let's say, for example, also I want to put this in a standard frame. Am I going to be able to pull that off without losing too much? I'm going to bring up the bottom. Let's see if this is close, not to the default, but to a 2x3. Let's see if a 2x3, that works. That's all we needed. 2x3 is a standard frame, and I think that works a lot better for this image. Now, is there anything else you want to do? And this is where you have to decide what's important to you. I think maybe I want to change the light a little bit. This is still drawing me a little, so let's get a brush again. This time I'm just going to hit K, and I'm going to turn off auto mask. I want to paint with light a little bit. I'm going to paint in here, and I'm going to make that part a little bit darker. Oh yeah, that's better. And then I'm going to hit the brush again. Oops, I got to start again. Hit K again because I want to do something different. This thing over here, I want to de-emphasize it a little bit, so I'm going to make it a little bit lighter, but then I'm going to make it bluer. And again, blue is going to take the warmth out of it. And let's increase the blacks. Actually, I'm going to bring the exposure down. Okay, that's looking better. Now, conversely, let's hit K again and open up this part of the canyon a bit. Let's open up in here. I'm just going to paint roughly, and now I'm going to turn Auto Mask back on. Let's turn it on because I want to get this side of the canyon all the way over here. All right, let's open this thing up a little bit. And now let's bring up the exposure. Oh yeah, that looks better. And again, since it was down in the canyon, it's lost some of its color as far as the camera was concerned. I'm going to make it warmer by adding yellow. And I'm going to take out some of the magenta. I can see the red in there. I want to take some of that out. I'm going to add some blacks and increase the contrast a little bit and bring up the exposure. And I think I'm done. I think I'm really... no, I'm not done. I see one more thing I want to do. Yes, we have the road here. I want to help you get there. So I'm going to turn off the Auto Mask, and let's just draw a line across out into the valley, which is where you would go if you were driving down here. And I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. I'm going to take some of the warmth out of it because I want to create some variation in it. And as I do that, I realize I don't want it brighter. I think I just wanted the color change. I'll add some contrast as well. Oh, that was the answer. That looks great. So let's hit enter. What am I going to do last? I'm going to, again, add my little vignette. The vignette has a subliminal effect of bouncing you back into the image if you venture a little too close to the edges. And it doesn't even look like I did anything now. But if I hold down the eyeball here, see how it just darkens those edges a bit, which brings you into here. And consider, let's go full screen again. Here's the raw file we started with. And I know this is not what it looked like to my eyes because you have to stare at these shadows when you're at any of these locations and understand you can see well into there. It's your camera that's failing. And also another thing when you're out in the desert Southwest, auto white balance is a complete fail on your camera most of the times. It just doesn't know what to do because of all of these colors that are reflecting up. Yet we took this and just transformed it into that. And that really tells the story of this place that we stopped. Again, this is in Canyonlands National Park. I love this particular shot, and I think this is definitely going to deserve getting a print because it really brings back the memory of what I felt when I was looking down into that canyon. All right, I think we're done with that one. Any questions, Di? Okay, you guys are quiet tonight. Oh, while we're here, let's all the edits that I did here. Now, I don't want all the masking and everything, but let's say I want to use that because I have another image right over here in Monument Valley that has some similar problems. Could I do something to jumpstart getting me there? And the answer is yes. And what you do is come over here to presets. And I'm going to click on a new user. I'm going to be in user presets. I'm going to create a preset. And let's call it, what is today? January 29. I'm going to call it January 29. And I want to have everything repeated that I did with the exception of the masks. I'm going to leave the masks alone and just click on create. And now if you look in my presets, there it is, January 29. So if I go over to this image and click on January 29, it will apply all those presets. Now, is it completely overblown for this particular image? Yeah, it is. But it got me started. And I can just come in here and say, well, this doesn't need that much color, doesn't need that much saturation. Maybe the exposure is a little different. I want that up. But the similar thing has happened here because this is called the West Mitten. This is in Monument Valley. This is perfect color. The problem is This is not. This whole foreground has gone way too yellow, but this could be an easy fix. As long as we're here, let's hit the M key to do our linear gradient again. And I'm just going to gradient from the bottom up. And let's add some blue to it to take some of that orange out. And look what happens. Doesn't that look a whole heck of a lot better? In fact, while I'm there, I could even add some saturation back in, even add a little green to it. Because what that's going to do is it's going to counter the reds that were in there. And yes, there's a lot more I could do to this image. Whoops, I don't know what the heck key I just hit. That wasn't the key I wanted. All right.
Okay, you have a question.
Okay, I have a question. Hold on a second. Let me get out of here. I've just completely clicked on something. I don't know what I did. I leaned against the keyboard and I got this. Let me go back into the library module. Wow, it's stuck there. What did I... There it goes. Wow, that was bad. All right, let's get out of the Zoom. I'll get to your question in a second. Another virtual copy. I just want to reset. So that quickly, we went from there. Nope, reset. Oh, I left develop module. Let's reset that one. Okay, so that quickly, just up taking that preset and applying it and putting that one gradient in, we went from there to there. So it's a good starting point. Okay, what's the question?
Okay, it's from Robert Ferguson.
Yes, Robert.
Last year on the Monument Valley trip, you were pushing to use the color checker passport to help correct colors from the camera.
Okay.
I noticed you are just going with Adobe Color in these pictures.
Okay, great question, and you set me up for something coming. So what Robert asks is, last year that I used in Monument Valley, used the color checker passport, used to be X-Rite, now it's Calibrate, to do stuff like this. And the answer is stay tuned because, let's see, where are my, let me go back into the library. I have the color checker shots. And again, I'm going to do this in detail next week. I was kind of saving that. You're stealing a little of my thunder, but that's okay. Let's go into all photographs. And let's see. So the question is about the color checker. So there's one in here somewhere. Let's scroll up. There, it just went by. Up, that's a cloudy day color checker, but we can use it. Okay, there's the color checker. And if you look at color under develop, the default is, oh, this one already has the right. Here, all right, here's the Adobe Color. So how do I get the best color in these scenes? And this is a gray ramp from white to black. And look, there's red, green, blue, and CMYK, the two colors, and then some other colors that occur in nature. And what a color checker profile will do is it looks to see what you actually end up getting on the location that is wrong. So for example, standing here, even though this is a cloudy day in Monument Valley, there's still the color reflecting up, and that's going to influence all of these other colors. So what this allows you to do is to create a profile of the colors for this specific camera in this place. So what does that mean? Well, it's going to look at here, and it's going to, all right, pick the white balance. Let's just, so you can pick that for white balance. It was already set. The red, green, and blue, though, look kind of faded if you actually had a color checker in your hand. So how do you use this thing? Well, you take a picture just like this. Then you go up to File. You have to install this plugin. It's free on the website. Export with preset, color checker. And you give it a name. I'm going to call this January 29 again because it's going to ask, that's all you got to do, just give it a name. The software is then going to calculate it out, and it's going to tell you, okay, Lightroom needs to be restarted to activate the profile. And that message should show up. Usually it takes about 30 seconds to do its thing. Then you need to come into where it says profile and load those profiles in. You got to tell it you want to be able to use it. So like any good cooking show, I had one in the oven for you already. So if I come down here and click on Browse, let's see. There's all the standards, the Adobe Color stuff. And what I need to go is go into camera matching. And, oh, that was what I wanted. Oh, and it's not going to do it because I did that on my laptop. That wasn't on here. So I guess we're going to do it. There we go. Color checker camera calibration. You have to restart Lightroom. Fine. Let's just do it. So I have to restart Lightroom. So I'm going to quit Lightroom for a second and just say skip this time. And then we're going to open Lightroom again. Then the profile will show up. So good question. And we're going to do this again. I'll explain a little more what's going on when we do the color class. Okay, so Lightroom, let's just restart it. And here it's coming back. And now I'll be able to load. Okay, there's the color checker where we left off. Now if I go into Adobe Color and click on Browse and go down into Camera Matching and Natural Profiles, here we go. Okay, January 29. Here's the one. See, it says January 29 right here. So what I do is I put a star on this. Nope, I put a star on, not on, yeah, January 29. There we go. There's there it says January 29 profile. And I can click close. And now because I put a star on it, it will show up in the list. Look what happened to the colors. That's what a color checker looks like. This is what Adobe was giving us. Look at all the colors that are gone. So what a color profile does, since these are all known values, red, green, or blue, etc., the software knows what they're supposed to look like. But when something happens, maybe it's the light, maybe it's a color reflecting up, maybe it's just the way your camera white balance is set, you're going to lose a lot of color. And the Adobe Color is reverse engineered. So it's very safe, but it's costing you a ton of color. And if I just apply the profile, watch particularly the blues and even the red, and look at how all the colors jump into place. So how do I use this for other images? So let's say, I'll select this image, which I've already done some color editing, but that's okay. I'm going to sync this color checker to here. So to sync it, I click on Synchronize. I'm going to do Check None. What I want is Treatment and Profile and Calibration. So those two things are going to give us everything that was just color applied there. Click on Synchronize. And then if I come over here, you can see this has the January 29. And again, there's the Adobe Color. There's the January 29 color. Now, is it necessarily better or the way I really want it? Well, I had already edited this without that profile, but that's what it allows you to do. And when you're in tough situations, like a place like Monument Valley, let's see, let's pick another one. I'm going to cut ahead. Let's say this image. I'm going to go to January 29 and look what happens to the colors. That's what Adobe is giving us. Here's an actual profile from out here, and look how much more life the image gets. Now, I had gone in and adjusted this blue because it wasn't the way I wanted, but we'll go into this in more detail. Did that answer your question? And any response in there?
Nope.
Okay, so let's continue on. So let's see. Let's go back to my collections, and let's move on because we've already gone for a half an hour, and I haven't even gotten to the soups yet. All right, let's do soup. This one's going to end soup. This is a little diversion. This is going to be somewhat.
Said yes, I answered
Okay,
the question.
good, Robert. Here we go. I loved the way this tree was on the ridge. The same thing happened. It's got the Adobe Color. Let's cut to the chase this time and go right to the January 29. Look what happened to the sky just by doing that. What that means is, see, your camera is thrown off with its balance, with its color, because of all the orange red reflecting up. And just by doing the profile, look what it did for that sky. It looks so much better. What does this image need? Again, the same thing's happening. We've got this orange red reflecting up, and the tree has lost its color. So let's hit K again. This is going to be a real short edit. Let's hit K. And turn on auto mask because I just want to pick up the brush, the tree pines, the pine needles on this juniper. And by the way, if you're not sure about auto mask versus not auto mask, If I turn off auto mask and click somewhere, do you see that whole circle? Watch what happens. When I click in there, it gets everything in that circle. If I turn on auto mask and just come into the shadow, even though the circle goes into the sky, it only selects what matches the tone underneath. So that's what auto mask does. So that's what allows me to get just this tree here. So like we did with that last image, let's bring the blue back and let's add the green. And saturation, in fact, I think I'm going to brighten this one up. Let's bring the exposure up. And as I do that, I see, wow, it needs even more saturation. It's really lost its saturation. And oh, you know what? I'm going to do a little bit more. Let's go to 100%. And as I look at it, yeah, that looks pretty good. I want to do something for the trunk a little bit as well. So let's hit K again. I've got auto mask on. I'm going to select the trunk of the tree, some of the big branches, and I want to put a little bit more life back into them. There's not a lot of branches you can see well that aren't in shadow, but let's just get those. And I'm going to add some yellow back into them and bring up the exposure a bit. My goal is I want to separate it out from the rest of the image. That looks good. All right. So I like it. There's not a whole lot more I want to do, but the tree is tiny. Look at the height from there to there and notice how big the foreground is. The foreground is overpowering it. So forget standard aspect ratios. I'm going to hit the R key and I'm just going to crop this what I think the image needs. I'm going to bring it all the way up to like here. And by the way, also notice, again, if you haven't been here before, I use the golden ratio grid, not the rule of thirds. Because if I did the rule of thirds, which I can do under Tools, Crop Guide Overlay, and tell it thirds, well, it's telling me the tree should be over here, which would mean I'd have to crop this thing like that. And watch what happens if I do that. That doesn't look right, does it? The tree's far too over on the right. So let's hit the crop tool again. Change it back to golden ratio, which is right here. That puts it on. That's good. Now, do I need that much left and right? Maybe not. I think I need about that much foreground. Let's say a little bit less. I want to keep this little, whatever that thing is. I like it. And I'll take a little bit less on the right. And there we go. Now the sky. I still think the sky color is off a bit. Let's use the color mixer tool and get the eyedropper and just click up in here. And again, it's slightly pushed to the cyan. It might have been that way. I want it a little pure bluer. Again, make believe. Let's say I had a polarizer on here. Let's use it at its full power. I'm going to bring the brightness up a little bit. So I can just go luminance shift. And I like it. One other thing, let me get create my virtual copy so I can reset, because I'm going to show you one other cool thing. And this is, we're getting artistic at this point. We're making a creative decision. Technically, I'm looking up a hill. So the sky, really could have looked this way. But if I want to add a little dimension to a sky when there's not a cloud to be found, let's do this. I'm going to go up to the masking panel and I'm going to use a linear gradient again. So we'll click on linear gradient and I'm going to drag up something like this. I only want to affect the sky, however. So in order to get rid of everything else, what I can do is where it has the mask, and we've got the 3 dots, click on there and tell it to intersect the mask where the sky is. So that means it's only going to do a linear gradient where there was also sky. This is one of the greatest new updates in Lightroom, the fact that you can do these intersections and subtractions and additions, and you can do it a bunch of times. And when I do that, watch what happens. Look at that. It just put that green linear gradient in the sky, took the tree out. What am I after? I want to add a little dimension to the sky, even though there's no clouds. I'm going to do that by increasing the exposure a bit to add a little bit of brightness at the horizon. Look how that brings it to life. You don't have any clouds, but you want to add a little bit of dimension into the sky. There you go. That's the way to do it. And I'm just going to hit enter to get out of my masks, scroll down to my effects, add a little bit of vignette. And let's look one more time, full screen. That's what we ended up with, but that's what we started with. A subtle edit, but look out, just doing that little lightning to the sky and bringing back in the green into that juniper tree just brought everything back to life. Love it. Onward. I got work to do. Let's see, what do I have for you for appetizers? You know what? I'm going to bypass the appetizers for now. We'll see if we can come back to that because I want to get to the main course where I talked about what I wanted to do. And here's one that you would think is just going to be a mess. And it would have been. In fact, here's all the pieces of it down below. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to reset it just so you can see. This is what these looked like. And if I go to the basic panel, what did I do? Basically the same thing. But I also had masks for the foreground and sky. But let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do it after the fact. Now the beauty is now in Lightroom, you can do your DNG denoising on a pano, as long as it says pano DNG there. So that's what the pano looked like after I stitched it together. Gee, can something like that be saved? You would think. And the answer is, well, obviously, because if not, I wouldn't be doing this. Let's do the same thing. Let's bring down the highlights, open up the shadows. Could I go back to one of my standard presets? Sure, let's go to presets. Let's see. And you can see I can just scroll through these. Oh, actually, here's the one we just created. That's a little too light. You know what? The January 29 we did is a good starting point. Let's work with it. So first thing, the foreground, too dark. How do we get to the foreground? We select the sky. Select the sky, and then we invert it. So if we click on the three dots, tell it invert. There we go. Let's bring up the exposure here. There we go. That's looking better. Now it's looking weird because the sky's dark. And that's okay. Hold on. Be right. We'll get this fixed. We'll make the darks, the shadows a little, the blacks a little darker. Actually, I'm going to bring the shadows down a smidge because we're going to have to deal. There's some weird light going on. These are the mittens, by the way, these two things. Let's do the sky now. So let's create a new mask. This time we'll do the sky, and let's bring the sky exposure up so that it now makes sense to the foreground. There we go. That's all that needed. All right. Actually, I'm pretty happy with that. There's too much sky to the foreground. Again, not a problem. Let's hit enter on that. What does it need? Once again, when you're dealing with the foreground, you want to lead somebody into the image. Notice this all has the same color tone, this leading up into the monuments. That's not helpful because it gives as much visual power down here as it does to the subjects. So we're going to do an M again, the graduated linear filter, and I'm going to click and drag up because we don't want the color to be the same because then everything looks the same. We need to create some dimension in this. So I'm going to make it bluer and then bring up the exposure a bit. And as I do that, I'm going to make it greener too. It's not really making it green, it's taking magenta out. And then lastly, I'm going to take a little saturation out. And as I do that, I think it needs a little dehaze. We need to darken the foreground up a little bit, and that should do a nice job. And that does. All right, now the sky is obviously a problem. It's way too big. Let's go to a standard size in our crop. Let's cut to the chase. And if I click on original, 2:1 is a standard size. Let's see if 2:1 is enough. And no, it's not. It's still too tall because this is a very narrow shot. So let's go to 3:1. And we're going really panorama here. But strangely enough, 3:1 is a standard frame. You can buy this in Hobby Lobby or Michael's. It's actually a 12 by 36. It's a standard frame size there. All right, so how else can we add some life to this? Let's start by adding some contrast, and just that gets things on the way. But this thing over here is called the West Mitten, and for some reason it's gone a little orange, a little too orange. So let's go to 50% magnification so we can see this a little better. Oh, it gives you a sense of scale too. We got one car there in the valley. But the light was kind of weird at this point, so we need to deal with it separately. Let's get a brush, K. And again, the base, this thing is just way too orange, so we're going to have to take away some of that. Actually, the whole thing's a little too orange. Some of the colors were a little strange while we were out there because it had been wet, and sometimes when the rocks get wet, they do take on some stranger colors. Let's bring up the exposure, and it needs blue and some green, and it needs some desaturation. Yeah, it's looking more what it looked like. But now while we're there, let's add some contrast, bring the exposure up a bit, and we need to add to the blacks. All right, we're getting close. Now we need to do some light painting on it by itself. So again, a K. And we're going to add a little shape to this thing. So where is it darker? Let's look at all of the mittens. This thing's called Merrick Butte. So you see the sun is coming from the right. Yet this one, for some reason, maybe because of the way the clouds were, didn't get it. So let's go ahead and on the left side of it, we're going to make this area darker. So we'll bring down the exposure there. That's looking better. In fact, we'll do the same thing for the east mitten rather. That's the east mitten back there. And we're going to make believe that there's some more clouds in the air. That was too much. I could do two things. I could start again, or I can now bring the flow down on the mask brush. Yeah, that's better. And then it lets us paint in individual places that we think need a little darkening. And these are both dark enough, so we're going to actually lighten them, the other two monuments, up. So let's hit enter on that and hit K again. Now we're going to paint on the right side, which we know is the side that the sun's coming from. And we're going to do it on both of these features. And let's bring up the exposure here. So what we're doing is we're just creating some more light, but it's going to add dimension to the whole scene. All right, so let's go full screen. Okay. I don't think I'm thrilled with the sky. So let's go up to here again. And do I have a sky one? Yeah, here's our sky. Let's go to the sky and the color. I don't know, the color's off. What does it need? If I add blue, if I add yellow, definitely not yellow. Let's add some blue to it. But you know, I think it's going to be time. I think it's time to go into Photoshop with this. And again, this is something we're going to explore more next week. But let's send this into Photoshop. So I'm going to hit Command E, which will send this image into Photoshop. Now, I didn't have Photoshop open, so Photoshop is going to first open, and then it will open this particular image. So any questions while that is opening?
No.
All right. You
Questions?
guys are quiet tonight. Hey, everybody. This is actually a little bit of an extra sidebar. I didn't get to do this because Photoshop was giving me a hard time when I was trying to record, but I wanted to show you one of the tools in Photoshop that would allow you to fix when the color just, you know there's something wrong, but you're not sure what it is. And that's the color balance tool. And to get to that, in the Layers panel, click on the little half circle over here and choose Color Balance. And that brings up this menu. And you see you have a lot more choices for color adjustments than you do in Lightroom. And we've got midtones, highlights, and shadows. So we get to do those three different adjustments separately. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit on the image so we can see kind of the tones a little better. Maybe back off a little. And I'm going to start with midtones and drag the sliders back and forth. So we go to cyan to red. Now this is somewhat subjective, but you know, I think I want a little more cyan. Magenta green. Does it need magenta? No. Does it need green? Yeah, it needs green. So we'll add green. Now yellow, blue. Oh no, it needed a lot of blue. Look at that. Blue looks a lot better. All right, that's good. Let's move on to highlights. We'll do the same thing. Slide back and forth. Does it need cyan? Does it need magenta or a little bit of each? This one's a little bit more subjective. I'm going to go a little bit cyan just for mood. Magenta green. Green, no. Magenta, yes. It needed some magenta. So we'll go there. And then yellow, no. Blue, oh man, blue. Look at that. Blue really helps it. That's the way I remember the place that day. And then lastly, shadows. So cyan, ooh, that looks good. No, the red's too much. I think we're going cyan on our shadows too. Red, green, red, green. They're kind of tough. Maybe a slight bit of red, slight bit of magenta. And then yellow, blue. Ooh, loving what the blue's doing to it. So we're going to add some blue to the shadows as well. And just by doing that, even the sky looks better. We turn this on and off, and look at the difference in the color. That color there, hate to say it, but it's a lot better. And we go to full screen. Let's just see this. Yep, I like that a lot better. Now, that's not the final crop either. We come out of that. In fact, I crop this in Lightroom, but let's go ahead and crop it while we're here in Photoshop. And let me just take a look at it on and off one more time. Now, as I do that, I think maybe I want maybe a smidge darker. Let's add a little more contrast to it. I'm going to go to Curves, and I'm going to put a point in the middle, 3/4 down and 3/4 up. And I'm going to darken the shadows a bit by dragging this down. And let's see, do the highlights need to be up? That just makes it a little more contrasty. Actually, that's kind of attractive. And let's see, we turn that on and off. Yeah, it just adds a little bit more pop. And wow, look at the difference between there and there. And I think that's the answer. So we'll explore this more in some upcoming classes, but there you go. That's one of the most powerful tools to fix color in an image when Lightroom just can't do it for you. You know there's something wrong, the color balance adjustment will allow you to do that. And the fact that it's in Photoshop, you can also isolate where it's going to happen. So just as a for example, if I go back in here and select the sky, let's say, for example, let's just say for argument's sake, I didn't want this applied to the sky. If I click on where the color balance mask is right here, I've got black in the foreground. I can hit Alt or Option Backspace, and it gets rid of that from the sky. And you can see there, and now it's only affecting the foreground. And if you Alt-click on the mask, you can see that's how it's doing the masking on that. And we'll cover this again in more detail. I think I like a little bit of it on the sky as well. And something else you can do is actually click on the mask and bring the opacity of the mask down. So if I bring the mask opacity down, it will let more or all of it through. I can see, drag left to right, and you can see what happens color-wise. And maybe the answer is somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I kind of like it about right there. And hit OK. And we'll go full screen again. And there we go. Yeah, I think that's the answer. So there's a little bit of the color balance adjustments in Photoshop, and we'll cover this more in our color class. Thanks for your patience. Do you want to jump right into desserts, or do you want another pano construction, or do you want dessert? What do you want? Just type it in the chat. Let's see what people want. Dessert or pano construction? Panoramic construction. Anybody have an opinion?
Dessert. We've got D, which I mean dessert.
Yep.
3 desserts and a pano.
3 desserts and a pano.
3 desserts and 4
All right.
desserts and 2 panos.
Oh, okay. I'm going to make this democratic. First of all, I'm going to ask you guys, can you go 10 minutes long? Is it okay? You want to do both? I'm happy to do both of them for you. So if you want them both, just give me a thumbs up. If you want...
You got a million thumbs up.
Okay, fine. We'll do them both. Let's build a panel from scratch because I want to show you some things. All right, so here is, I'll just show you the shots that were used to build it. We go full screen from left to right. This is one of my favorite places. This is called Valley of the Gods, and this is near Mexican Hat, Utah. And these are the raw files. Now, the first thing I would do would be to do my basic edits. So I did that already. I won't make you, it's the same things we've been doing. So again, the same shots. Here's the basic edits, the four pano sample for this. Now we're going to put them together. Now you could do these basics before or after. I like doing them before because it really lets me know if the panel is going to work. So I will do it to one panel, usually the one of the center ones in the panoramic stitch, and then apply it to the rest. Well, I've got my 4 images selected. Let's go up to Photo, Photo Merge, to Pano. And then we get the Pano Merge preview. Now, see how there's roughness here? What that means is I did a pretty good job on it, but this was handheld. And even why was it handheld, Joe? It was handheld because it was really cold out this day. It was about 20 degrees and the wind was blowing. So as nice as it looks, it was brutal. What are my options? Spherical versus cylindrical. Spherical is going to compress vertically at the bottom and the top. Usually with mountainy kind of things, you don't want to do it. Perspective is really for like in the city generally because it's going to be weird, kind of weird here. Strangely enough, perspective actually works pretty good. That surprised me. Let's see perspective versus, yeah, actually cylindrical looks like it might be, is that distorting? Looks like a perspective. No, I like cylindrical better. Now, do I want to try to straighten it out? I can drag the boundary warp, or if I go it all the way, look at what it does. The beauty of boundary warp, instead of doing a fill edges is basically Lightroom's version of content aware fill. It makes up stuff and it creates repeating patterns. So in this case, even though I handheld it, boundary warp worked really well. So let's just go ahead and go with that and see what we end up with our built-in panorama. And then we'll see the same things. What do we need to do to this to finish this image off? Looking at it right away, I think the sky's a tad dark. Again, this was shot with polarizers. So yeah, the sky's too dark. Now you can see the sky over here is kind of okay, but it's really dark over here. Well, why? Because I was shooting a polarizer. And as I rotated across, polarizers do this. This would have been close to 90 degrees from the sun, where in here we're getting closer. So how do we get rid of that? Because this is a problem. First, I'm going to brighten up the overall sky a little bit. Let's choose the sky. And let's just add a little exposure to it. I think I'm looking over here. I think that's pretty good. I'm going to make it a little bluer because the sky out west is much bluer than it is here on the East Coast. But this is still too dark. So we're going to use a linear gradient, which is M. And I'm going to go about in the middle and drag across to about there. I only want the sky. So once again, I need to intersect the gradient with the sky. So I click on here and say intersect mask with the sky. And I just love this. I love this selection. You can't even do this in Photoshop. Now I'm going to add exposure to this. And look, that's all it needed. Now the sky isn't so dark on the one side, and it fixes that problem. Now, while I'm at it, if I want to do something to the foreground, I don't have to select it. What I can do, I've already got the sky here. I can tell it to duplicate and invert the mask, and it gives me the foreground. So let's open up the exposure a little bit on that. And what I'm doing is I'm looking back here. And as I look at this, again, I stared at this. The shadows are a little too dark. The shadows weren't quite, I think I'm going to have to go in and get those manually. It was a little bit warmer, color-wise, a little bit more yellow. That's good. Again, we're competing with the foreground color-wise, though. So let's hit M again, and I'm going to just drag up from the bottom, and we're going to make this bluer, which is really what it looked like. And add a little contrast to that. That's looking great. Hit enter on that. Now let's look at the composition. What's the problem? As cool as this is over here on the left-hand side, it's really not adding to the image. There's a little too much of it. Let's hit the crop tool. And let's bring this over. How much of it do we need? I think something about like that. Do we need that much sky? Not, so we can bring that down a little bit too. And let's hit enter. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. Let's add a vignette. That's going to really help this image. Oh, we're going to do one other thing while I'm at it. I want to help the viewer get to these things. This thing is about exactly the same as this. Let's adjust it. So I hit K. Let's take, let me get my flow all the way up. Let's come into here. And I think we're going to darken this one a little bit. Let's try that. Darken a little bit, make it a little bluer, which will take the orange out. A little saturation. I want to just change the color a little bit. And as I look at it, I don't think it really needed to be darkened much. It just needed a slight color shift. And that's enough to distinguish this formation from this one. Now this one, on the other hand, needs a little more color. So let's go in and get this one. In fact, I think I'll take some of this as well. And let's add yellow to this, which will warm it up. Yeah, that's better. I do think this shadow, now, when you're dealing with an image, your eye goes to the lightest thing first. But if there's a couple of single dark things, they become drawing points as well. And I think these shadows over on the left are a little too dark. So let's hit the K again. And I'm just going to come in and select these shadows. And I think this one too. We'll leave these two on the main formations alone. And let's bring up the exposure and the shadows on those, just to show a little more of the detail through, and they become less dominant. In fact, as I'm doing that, I'm going to bring down the flow a bit and add a little bit of that effect into those spots as well. And I think that's looking pretty good. So once again, I'm going to create a virtual copy so I can reset this one. There's what we started with. There's the raw file just stitched together. Well, we did some edits first, but that's what it would look like if you took your raw images and stuck it together. And we took that and transformed it into that. Is there more I could do? Yes, I could be. Let me show you one other thing. While we're at it, let's get a brush. I'm going to add some cloud shadings on the ground. So I'm going to turn off auto mask, and let's see. This thing's a little too bright. Let's see, it's a little too bright in there. Let me bring the flow up. We'll add a cloud over here. So basically what I'm doing is I'm adding clouds that are casting shadows. Got a little bit of sky in there, so I can tell it in this mask. Whoops. Click on the mask, subtract the sky. If I got it, yeah, I got a little sky in there. Now let's turn down the exposure. And look what we get to do. We get to make new shadows because the clouds were coming over, even if they weren't. And I'll bring the saturation down too. Because if you have cloudy hitting something, it's going to be a little more desaturated. There we go. I think that's even better. So we went from there to there. Love it. Cool place if you've never been there. It's one of my favorite places to shoot. This is what's called BLM land, by the way, Bureau of Land Management. The beauty of it is it's free. You can go wherever you want. If you want to climb to the top of one of these things, have at it. You're on your own. You're also on your own if you fall off it, but that's your call. Questions?
More of a comment.
Okay.
Not everybody sees color like you do. Do you have any suggestions?
Oh, that's a good question. Not everybody sees color the way I do. Yeah, there is some truth to that. And the Color Checker Passport will help that. If you're not scheduled to join me on Tuesday and you have any color issues at all, as most people do, I highly recommend that you sign up for that one and join me, because one of the places that is more powerful than Lightroom for doing color fixes when you know there's something wrong but you don't know how to fix it is Photoshop. And I'd have to do an entire half an hour or more just on one tool in Photoshop that will allow you to fix that. And I will do that on Tuesday. Here's the thing I will offer you also, though. If you can't make Tuesday, I will include one demonstration on next Wednesday, which is the next photography kitchen. I will include one in there. So I'll promise you that. But learning to see color means you got to slow down. And it means you got to slow down when you're on location, because you got to stare at this stuff and burn it into your brain. Yeah, the sky looks a little too cyan. The rocks were redder than this. The trees were greener than this. But for that to happen, that requires slowing down when you're on location and letting it sink in. I always tell my people, put your camera away. Just stop. Just stare at the thing. Burn it into your brain what the color was, what the tone was, what made you stop and take the picture in that place. So, yes, it's a comment. So, again, here's the offer. I think if you join me next Tuesday, you will really find it valuable. And if you can't make, well, and again, even if you sign up and you can't make it, you get the recording. But I will add one of those tools that I think is so important into next Wednesday's Photography Kitchen. Deal? Okay. Let's get a dessert in. Let's see. All right, you want a balloon or a canyon? So here's your two choices. 1, 2.
2.
1, 2? Twos? Everybody's picking 2.
Nobody's picking anything.
Nobody's
Oh,
okay.
twos.
All right. Canyon it is. Okay. 2s win. All right. So this is a famous place called Mesa Arch. This is in Canyonlands. And the beauty of Mesa Arch is that what happens near sunrise is that the underside of the arch glows an unnatural orange. I mean, it's much brighter than this. The reason I picked this location is because often the distance here, if I zoom in on it, let's go to 100%, is a formation back here called the Washerwoman. And it's hard to see here, but you see there's a little hole in the, let's go to 200%. You see there's a hole in the formation, and what the feeling is, it's somebody, maybe it was a washer guy, I don't know, using one of those, what are those corrugated things called? The washboards? Mm-hmm. Okay. You can see the hands extended out, and they said that she was doing washing with a washboard. Whatever. How do I bring that out and fix what the problems are in this particular image? So this will be our dessert. Let's go to basic. Usual. This needs the shadows up. Let's bring the highlights down. The sky's kind of bright. We're going to have to deal with that separately as well. And we'll do some texture, clarity, dehaze. Let's bring up the vibrance, which really, if I bring up the vibrance, it's only going to affect way back here. It's the saturation that's going to start bring things to life. Now, I honestly am not thrilled with how it has treated the orange. I think the orange got a little bit too dark. So let's go to the color mixer and click on one of these orange spots. And I think it needs to be over this way a little more. So this is going to take everything that's got that color orange in it. Now, so you can see it's messing around with the very foreground. We'll fix that separately. And I'm still not happy with it. We're going to do something separate. I actually love what it did in here. This is great. This part, though, got too orange, so we're going to have to deal separately. I could use a brush, or I can use a gradient. Let's just make it easy. We'll use a linear gradient. I just hit the M key. Let's drag this up. I was going to desaturate this anyway, because that's not where I want your eye to go. So I'm going to add some blue into that, some green, and desaturate it. That's really kind of what this thing looks like. And again, I always tell people, stare at this stuff. We'll bring up the shadows. Because this rock down here isn't actually particularly colorful in the actual place. The orange underneath the arch is still messing me up, so we're going to use a brush. I hit K, and I'm going to select this. So, I have auto mask turned off. We need that back on. Let's hit K again, auto mask, and I'm just going to drag across that, and look how it does a great job. So it should be brighter. Oh, there we go. Am I still thrilled with the orange color? Not really. So what do we do? Do I add a little more yellow to it? Is that going to be the answer? That helps. I think it needs a little bit more clarity in there too. Maybe a little dehaze. There we go. Now it's getting to where I want it to be. Now notice also there's this little box right here that says color. What does it do? It allows you to actually add a color overlay to what you've selected. So watch this. If I click on here and come into orange, I'm going to get this nice bright orange in here. Watch what happens. It just added orange into there. That's what it needed. That's what this place looks like. If you think it's too much, you can bring the percentage down here. But this tool allows you to add a color overlay over to everything else you've done. Now, I love the orange back in here. This top of the arch technically should be brighter as well. So let's hit enter on that. We can be done with the adding the color. Let's hit K again, and this time we're going to get the top of the arch up here. And again, when our people were here, I asked them, stare at the arch in the shadow, because you're going to see it's a lot yellower and a lot brighter than your camera is going to record it. That's the color that the thing is. Great. Now let's go work on the washerwoman. Let's get a brush, and I'm going to select in here. Yes, it's getting a little more than I want. We'll deal with that. I'm going to come into the foreground a little bit as well. And now I'm going to hold down the Alt and get the parts beyond to get rid of them a little bit. So now let's bring up the exposure. I'm going further than I need to. I want to see what's going on. Add some contrast. Let's add clarity and dehaze back into this. Yes. And now let's bring the highlights. There are highlights in there. And some contrast, and we'll bring the exposure up a little more. Now, should it be a little bit warmer? Maybe a smidge. Let's add some warmth to that. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. We're not going to be able to make it look as if there was light really hitting it, but we're in a lot better shape. We got two other things, though. Let's look at the horizon. Is this skewed a little bit? Let's hit the R key for our crop. Do we want the horizon straight? Is it really straight there? You know, I can't even answer that. I'm going to say yes. We'll go with it that it's straight. Now let's select the sky. Create new mask, select the sky. There's our sky. It picked up part of the mountains here. I'm actually fine with that. Let's bring the exposure down on the sky. It needs some blue, because it was bluer than that. Yeah, I think that's actually pretty good. I add a little red, which will make it bluer. Am I thrilled with the blueness? I don't think I am. Let's add dehaze and clarity. In fact, yeah, it needs more. Let's hit the color box again, and let's pick a middle blue. It's going to be way too much. Oh, actually, that's not too bad. That's kind of what I wanted. And one more K for our brush. Let's hit K again. I want to pick this area underneath the sky, get the little bit of the mountain range back there. Yes, I got a little top of that piece. Actually, that's okay. Let's add some dehaze into that. Oh, look how it's starting to bring out some of these variations. In fact, as you do that, let's pick in here. Yes, now we're starting to get a little bit more detail out of the mountains. And strangely enough, this part of the mountain went a little too blue. So let's select that, and we'll bring the saturation down. That's better. Now, what is the size of this thing? This is the default out of the camera. Let's take a look. So if we go to original, what is that original size? It's a 4:3. Let's see what a 4:6 is. Does that work better? Or are we losing too much of the top of the arch? Or do we need it to be, let's go back to the original shape. We'll just do the original, which is the original aspect ratio. You know, is that an 8:10? I hate 8:10s. No, that's an 8:10. Okay. You know, I hate 8:10s, but I hate to say it. If you really want to see the top of the arch, that's a good choice. If you like me and you don't like 8:10s, you go to 4:6. And let's go ahead and bring this down. I'm going there. I'm going 4:6 because that's a standard frame size and it works. Let's add a little vignette. And once again, let's do a virtual copy of this and reset it. And we'll look at it full screen. There's the raw file we started with. Whoop, and that's definitely not it. And there's our edit as it draws in. Now, you might decide there's something. All right, I'm going to decide. even though this thing probably was this bright, it's a little bit of a distraction. Agreed. So let's fix that. How do we fix that? Oh, let's get a brush. And I'm going to select the orange over here. And I'm just going to bring the exposure down a little bit, just to take a little bit of the bright heat off of it. Maybe I'll desaturate it a smidge too. I think that's enough. That's all it needed. So, yeah, that's better. So now we're there. Just taking a little bit of the brightness off. So we went from there to there. You can see as it draws in. You can see the canyon here drawing in. You can get a little bit of an outline of the washerwoman on a lovely morning, lovely sunrise at Mesa Arch and Canyonlands National Park.
Remember what it looked like?
Great question. The question was, do I take photos with my phone, and do they help me see what the final edit should be? I've and I'm driving my wife nuts with this. I am enjoying my iPhone photography less and less every day. I am really tired of it. However, when you're at a scene like this and you're not sure how to approach the edit, the computational processing that the phones do is a great help, because it automatically is going to fix the highlight shadow thing and give you your saturation back into your colors. So the answer is yes. Sometimes if I'm in front of a tough scene, I will take a shot with my phone to see how my phone processes it. I don't like the final images. The sharpness is just not great. Face it. Let me show you. This is another image that I took in Monument Valley. When I zoom in to this, that's 200%. Let's look at 100%. Look at how incredibly clean that is. Phones can't do that. It's just not even close. In fact, this is before. One tool I did not show you was the denoise. In fact, I've even got a little airplane here. That's got to be fixed. All right, there's my crop. All right, got to fix that. Oh, it's got to go. This did not need the AI generative. This just needs the old-fashioned spot removal tool. But if I look at this at super zoomed in, you can see there's some grain in the sky. Now, this is at 200%, but Lightroom can get rid of that. And that's under detail. And you can see I haven't added any extra sharpening to it, but I can click on denoise. Now, what Lightroom's going to show you on the screen is it's going to show you a zoomed in part at 300%. And you click it on and off, and it shows you the before and after noise. It's making it look like it's super good because it's the 300% magnification, but you click on enhance, and then any grain that shows up when you're magnified above 100%, watch, you can see it's actually generating a new file up here. It says using denoise. So before I go out to print and before I use any other third-party softwares, I will always run this denoise, because look at how clean that is now. But again, my point is that when I look at this at 100%, it's not just about resolution, because there are phones that have lots of megapixels, but none of them create anything anywhere near as clean as this. That's why I love my camera so much. So yes, I will use it to check to see. When we're in the field, I will often take a phone picture with our photographers around on a workshop, just to show them what I am seeing compositionally. I'll give them some ideas. I don't want to tell people what to shoot, but I'll give them some ideas by just taking phone shots and letting them see it. I find myself doing that less and less as far as processing goes, because I know what I can do processing, but I do find it helpful for other people to take an iPhone shot and you can see, oh yeah, this image can be made into this because my phone can do it. When I do it with my camera, it's going to end up being that much better. And again, as an example, here's another one. That's the raw file. And I got rid of that other balloon. Then there's the final image. Any other questions? No? No other questions?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Diane.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all for joining me, and see you again soon.
Cheers.
Have a good weekend.